Hey.
There you go. I am functional. All right.
These are big cookies.
We're a big program.
Do you want to take a cookie number for the last one?
I'm very impressed that the front row of version seems to be a true cultural universal. Maybe you all want to come up and just close it, and I feel very, sort of like, is it my breath? Is it? These are enormous cookies.
There you go.
I mean, do you know, is Marcia coming?
Marsha's not, she's traveling.
She's not, okay.
She's corporate and she'll be on the way,
Okay. Should we wait for David or should we start? We start. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Seth Background. I'm the director of the graduate program in science writing. This is Tom Levinson, my colleague, also a professor in the program. First of all, thank you all for coming on this delightful Friday afternoon. We are going to tell you a little bit about the program and how it works, and then open it up to questions. You can ask anything you want about our curriculum, about paying for the program, about what people do after the program, about questions that we have not thought of, as long as you are okay with us saying that we're not sure of the answers. And for people who are watching on the live stream, how can they send in
I
questions?
have a chat room open, and
Okay.
they're going to send questions in to me, and I'll
Great.
forward them up to you.
Perfect. I'll start giving you a very brief overview of our curriculum, and then we can take it from there. So the graduate program in science writing is a year-long program. So 2 semesters plus a summer internship. And this is our 7th, 18th year? No, it's our 15th year. 15th year? Yeah. Something like that. Not a program in math, clearly. And we have gone through a number of changes, especially over the last couple of years, to our curriculum as we are adapting to the changing media landscape and the changing science writing landscape. But some things have stayed consistent. First, the logistics of and dynamics of the class. We typically have classes of 8 students that work very closely together. 3/4 of all of your classes are with those other 7 students. There's also a graduate student lounge that sort of doubles as an office. So one of our goals is for the students to form the beginnings of a science writing community here that they can then travel with throughout their career. And to that end, we also try and, right off the bat, make our students part of the GPSW, the larger GPSW community. So one thing that we started this year is when you arrive, all students are set up with an alumni mentor that they then are in touch with throughout the year. And that is a relationship that we get rolling, and then it's up to you and the mentor to do with that what you will. But our goal there is both to plug you into our alumni network and also just to give you as many perspectives and contacts as possible in this community. The fall semester there are 2 required courses, one of which is called the Advanced Science Writing Seminar, and that is a mega course in the fall, which means it actually counts for 2 of your 4 courses. It meets for 6 hours a week, and that is divided into a series of different modules. So in the fall, the largest module that we have is news writing, and that is taught by Tim Deschamps, who works for Nova, for the PBS show Nova, and runs the Nova Next website. And as many of the pieces as possible in the news segment are also published on the Nova site. And one of the reasons why we do that is because we want you to have as many clips as possible when you leave here and enter into the workplace. We also have our own student-run publication, but one thing that we got more and more feedback over in the past 5 or so years is that students really wanted clips in addition to just having clips on their own site. So we do run as many pieces as possible on the Nova Next website. We also have 2 modules that this is our 2nd year, so next year will be the 3rd year, is that right, for podcasting? Hey David, you can come up if you want. So a unit on podcasting, which is taught by Cynthia Graber, a longtime radio journalist and the founder and host of the podcast Gastropod, which is about the science of food. And a data journalism course taught by Rahul Bhargava, who's a data scientist here at MIT. In addition to that, we have a front of the book. It's called the front of the book section, which is covers small magazine features. So 200 to 300 word magazine pieces that generally appear towards the beginning of magazines. We have a digging component, which is archival work. And both the digging and the front of the book sections are taught by Marcia Bartusiak, who has been with the program almost since its inception, not quite, but almost.
From the 2nd year.
From the 2nd year. And you as well, is that right?
I came the 3rd year.
The 3rd year. And is that it for the fall?
There's you start the investigative.
Oh, that's right, yes. And you also start an investigative journalism unit that launches in the fall, concludes in the spring, and is taught by Deborah Blum, a Pulitzer Prize winner and the director of MIT's Night Science Journalism program. I'll tell you a little bit about that. David can also speak to that. This is David Corcoran. David works with the Night Science Journalism program and with Undark, the magazine, which he can tell you about. And David arrived at MIT from the New York Times, where he was the editor of the Science Times section. So I think that covers the mega seminar.
Yep.
Then there's also in the fall, your other required course is a thesis seminar. And that is the start of your thesis project, which is a year-long narrative journalism project. That is, the final result will be 6,000 words. Those 6,000 words can take any shape that you and your advisor decide on, meaning that they can be a multi-part newspaper series, a single feature article, which is what most students do. We've not yet had a student do a podcast thesis, but that is also an option. We have had children's books.
We've had illustrated books. I don't think anyone's actually done a children's book, but you could do a video. You could do a documentary if you chose. The question is one of scale. So 6,000 words as a feature is a proxy for the scale you would do work in any other medium or genre.
No, I thought you were going to keep talking there.
Sorry. Yeah, how about them Red Sox?
Or Celtics.
Or Celtics, yeah.
The thesis seminar is also a course that we've changed over the last couple of years. That used to only start meeting in the fall in late October. We've now expanded that into a full formal course. And in addition to the thesis, we also have a feature writing section in that called narrative nonfiction, which is a 3,000-word assignment that you complete in the fall, which Tom is teaching this year. Do you want to
Yeah,
talk
sure.
about that?
The assignment is straightforward. 3,000-word feature is a pretty standard sort of medium-sized feature length. It's not a New Yorker break your axles kind of file type, but it's also not a news story or a quick hit review. It's something that requires research and development, and most importantly, from a writer's point of view, voice, perspective, and structure. Most importantly, structure. And in that sense, in some ways, it's a rehearsal for your thesis, but it's also a way to begin practicing what is the bread and butter of an income for very many freelance journalists. And over the course of the semester, as you're working on your thesis, developing the perspectives for the thesis, and identifying a plausible proposals, enough of a story for a proposal, and so on, all the stuff you do to develop that, you'll be sitting there and finding a story that merits your attention for that many words, merits a reader's attention for that many words, and yours for that many months. And you will be thinking about the kind of feature you want to write, and hence what kinds of publications you would propose it to, and then you write a pitch letter to that publication or that kind of publication, and you go through all the steps of what would be involved in both conceiving of, researching, reporting, and writing a feature, but also placing it within the professional landscape that you will presumably be entering at the end of the year.
So that more or less takes you through the first semester. You also each semester have one elective, which can be any course at MIT or Harvard. The only requirement is that one of your two electives be a graduate level elective. But we have had students take everything from world building in fiction to environmental science courses, really whatever you can think of. I think we have a student this year taking a course at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. There are a lot of options there. MIT has January off. You leave on Christmas break and come back generally the first or second day of February. Whatever is beyond, strongly encourage students to travel in January for thesis research. And we have money to help you do that. We've had students go to Hawaii, to Fiji,
Mexico, Alaska in January,
yeah,
Yellowstone in January.
right,
Some of our students are more
are hardier
practical.
than, yeah, or yes, right, more practical, or yeah. But yeah, we would like you to use as much of that time as possible for thesis travel and thesis research. And then the second semester is a lot like the first semester, except that the advanced science writing seminar is only a 1-unit course in the spring. And in the spring, the largest section of that is taught by Alan Lightman, who also unfortunately can't be here today, but he teaches a essay, book review, and op-ed section. In addition to that, we have another investigative section that Deborah Blum also teaches. Marcia Bartusiak does an explainer section, which is actually tied to our lab requirement, which is another requirement kind of built into several courses. And for that, we ask you to spend a total of 12 hours in a lab, or in 2 different labs, as the case may be, 6 hours per lab. And the reason we do that is because, one, we want you to take advantage as much as possible of the fact that you're at MIT, and there are a lot of really incredible labs here. And 2, just because philosophically we feel that in order to write well about science, we want you to have a sort of granular, as much of a granular understanding of what actually happens on a day-to-day basis as possible. Sometimes it can be kind of stifling and monotonous to be in a science lab. Sometimes it can be overwhelmingly exciting, but we want you to try and get as much of that experience as possible. In place of the other part of that double advanced seminar in the spring, we have a documentary course, which Tom also teaches.
It's a pretty straightforward proposition, though it's a rather demanding one. You enter the class mostly without much prior experience in documentary, and you leave having made with a team a professional quality documentary short, 6 to 8 minutes. And we go through as much of this sort of development of the technical skills as possible in a very short time. But the real emphasis in the course is on the sort of double task of creating the documentary from a writer's point of view, finding a story, conceiving of it in visual terms, writing the version of the script that gets you to your production, then looking at the material you've gathered and rewriting your script so that you can edit it, and finish it. And at the same time, sort of really come to grips with what it means to be a producer and realize that producing is not just a matter of bean counting and scheduling, though that's very much involved, but is part of the creative process of creating a project that can be done within your constraints and in which the constraints drive your creative thinking to interesting ways to solve the various problems you have to get from beginning to end. It's a fun course. It gets fairly pressured at the end, in part because people seem to fall in love with the editing process, and it's very hard to pull them away from the editing deck, even as everything else about the end of the year is bearing down.
One of the reasons why we have all of these different modules and we structure the year the way we do is that our goal for when you leave here is for you to be able to be dropped into any type of newsroom or job and be asked to do any type of assignment and have at least some comfort level and familiarity with that. So if you're asked if you get hired somewhere or interning somewhere and asked to do a podcast, great. Asked to work on a video, great. Asked to write long pieces, short pieces, pieces with more attitude, pieces that are more newsy. We want you to leave here feeling that you've been exposed to that, have some comfort level, not that you're going to be an expert in all of these different genres, but that you can tackle sort of whatever is thrown at you. The last part of the program then is the summer internship, which is, Shannon, a minimum of 6 weeks?
It's 10 weeks.
10 weeks, okay. A minimum of 10 weeks. Marcia runs our internship program. We have a long list of outlets and publications that we have relationships with over the years. We have never had a student not get an internship, although we always have students convinced that they are going to be the first ones. But that has never happened. Your year, although hopefully not your relationship with us, concludes in October when we have our own private graduation ceremony and a dinner with you and your families, hopefully. One other thing I left out, another really nice sort of capstone to the program is in May, we have a thesis day. I know some of you've been to a thesis day, right, last year? And that is where all of our students give presentations about their thesis, get a chance to answer questions, And actually, there's one other part that I left out. Alan Lightman also teaches a short unit on public speaking in preparation for the thesis. And again, that has two purposes. One is we want to celebrate you and the work you did and have a chance to do that publicly. Two is that we've recognized that public speaking is something that people are asked to do more and more, that more and more writers are looking at as another potential area of revenue. And so we want you to have some experience giving a presentation about your work and talking in front of a hopefully fairly friendly audience about that. I realize I should have probably told you a little bit about us before we started. I'm Seths Background. As I said, the director of the program. My background, before I arrived at MIT in 2011, the entirety of my career had been in journalism. I've written for, I think, every frequency publication imaginable, from websites where I had to post 3 or 4 times a day to quarterlies. Since about 2004, most of my work has been in long-form journalism and books, although not all of my work. And I continue to be involved in journalism and working on theses and writing books and all of that. Marcia, who's not here, has written 10 million books. How many books has she written?
Between 6 and 8.
So somewhere between 6 and 8. She's the only person on staff who has had a supermodel read her book on Oprah. And if you go by her office, you will see the screenshot of that. I think it was a model being, her makeup was being done, and she was reading one of Marcia's books about physics and astronomy. Alan Lightman is both a physicist and writer, and a fiction and nonfiction writer. He has perhaps written a million books. I think he's written 28 books or something. He's written a lot. He's frighteningly prolific and good. And he is one of the founders of the program. Was the first person at MIT to get a joint tenure position in both the sciences and humanities. That covers the faculty, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Then we also, I'm going to tell you about, so the Night Science Journalism program, which David can tell you more about, is a mid-career, year-long science journalism fellowship that's at MIT. In addition to the fellowship, they also run a magazine there called Undark. And David, why don't you tell us about both the KSJ and Undark?
Sure. So the Night Science Journalism program is named Knight, K-N-I-G-H-T. It's named for the Knight Foundation, which provides our endowment. The program is about to be in its 35th year. And what we've done from the beginning is bring 10 professional science journalists each year to the MIT campus for the academic year. They get a stipend. They live in the Cambridge-Boston area. Most of them relocate here for the year. And the idea is that these are professional journalists. Some of them have staff jobs at publications like The Guardian or The New York Times or Chronicle of Higher Education. Many others are freelancers, but they're all accomplished science journalists. We have an admissions process every year. This year we had 140 applicants, I believe, for 10 slots. So these are people at the top of their profession. The idea of the fellowship is to give these journalists a year away from whatever their job or occupation is, so they can take courses at MIT and Harvard, learn about the current academic world of science, and can learn other fields as well, and can even take courses that will sharpen their skills. So each year, 3 or 4 of the fellows take intensive courses in things like photography, documentary filmmaking, audio and podcasting. And then presumably they go back to their jobs or go back to their freelance occupation, better rounded, relaxed, and with new skills and a whole lot of knowledge and new connections. So that's who we are. Our relationship with this program is somewhat informal, but pretty extensive. Each year, or each semester, we have 2 interns from the graduate program in science writing.
2 paid interns.
2 paid interns, that's right. They work, each of them works 10 hours a week. Primarily, their job is fact-checking for our new online science magazine, which is called Undark. Anybody in this room know about Undark? A couple hands. Great. Well, you should all check it out. Undark.org. It's a new science magazine, started February 2016. And the mission, the goal is to cover the intersection of science and society, so we care very much about the practical, everyday human implications of science. Very much in our wheelhouse, things like climate change, the federal health policy. We just did a very big piece about the national park system in the age of Trump. My connection with it is not huge. I spend most of my time working on the fellowship program, but I can say, with all modesty, that it's really, the magazine's really come an extraordinarily long way in just 18 months, and we're now in the same conversation as science magazines like Wired and Aeon, Nautilus. We're certainly attracting many of the same readers, and perhaps even more important, many of the same writers. So we now are able to bring on top drawer science writers to write for us. One of the things that we do is, even though we have a very small staff, we take very seriously our responsibility to be accurate, and so we have a full-fledged fact-checking operation. We have a full-time associate editor whose only job is fact-checking. Because we run about 5 pieces a week, she needs help, and that's where you guys come in. That's what our interns, for the most part, do. I think they've found it to be very rewarding and kind of something that they've never done before. So very much a learning experience, and we find it enormously helpful. We certainly could not do as much as we do without the interns from this program. We're about a 5-minute walk from here in MIT Building E19. One other thing we do, for those of you in the Boston area who are in the Boston area now, is we hold what we call a seminar twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays for our fellows, in which we invite people who are eminent in their professions, MIT professors, Harvard professors, experts, journalists, prominent journalists, artists, so we've had an artist or two, but scholars to talk about what they do to our fellowship group. And most of those meetings are open to the public. They're on our website, which is ksj.mit.edu, and if you're interested in attending, there are instructions there on how to do that.
What's the next speaker?
Let's see.
Kevin Esfeld.
Kevin? Yeah. Oh, I thought you just pulled that out.
No.
Kevin Esfeld, who is, he's at the Broad Institute, I think. He is a genetic scientist who was profiled not that long ago in the New Yorker. He is trying, or he's leading an effort to use the gene editing tool CRISPR to modify the genes of, I forget whether it's deer ticks or mouse ticks or deer or mice or whatever.
White-footed mice.
White-footed mice, thank you, on Nantucket to make them resistant to the ticks that cause Lyme disease. And it's going to be controversial, of course, and he is, one of the things that he's doing in addition to leading this effort is making it as transparent as possible. So the community, the Nantucket community, is very much involved and able to weigh in on the strategies that they're using. So it's fascinating. I haven't met him, but when I read this piece in the New Yorker, I thought we ought to invite him, and he accepted our invitation and is coming next week. So that's and check us out. We have several more seminars this semester, and then we'll have a full roster again in the spring.
And the internship gets to a couple of different things that have been real focuses for us over the past couple of years. One is finding ways to fund our students. That's been an enormous priority of the program. Last year, we were able to get funding, raise money totaling roughly $40,000 per student. We would love for that figure to actually be larger and cover the entirety of our students' tuition and expenses. We may be about to learn that we're going to get some more money for next year. I was hoping to have that information for you today. I do not have that yet. But the way our aid packages work is we do not give more aid to someone because we've decided we want them more or less. If we admit you into the program, we want you. And we have one sort of pool of money that we will divide up equally between the students. The only way that changes is if you obtain or we are able to get you a full scholarship through some other means. Unless you get a full scholarship through some other means, you will get your portion of that money from that pool that we have. And this internship program is one of the ways that we've tried to increase the funding that our students can get. The other focus is really preparing our students for when they leave here. So David and I and Deborah Blum and I and Tom have, since Deborah got here a couple of years ago and David got here I think a year after Deborah, have really looked for ways to more intimately integrate the KSJ and our program, both so our students could interact with the Knight Fellows, and so the Knight Fellows could be reminded of what it's like to be at a different point in your career and be really excited about the field. And so, for instance, this year, at the beginning of the year, when the new fellows arrived and they wanted to do profiles on their website, those profiles were written by our students, And we did that to hopefully set up another professional contact that the students would have and could start to form as they move through their careers. One last thing I should emphasize about the thesis is hopefully you've gotten a sense that you get a lot of attention. There are 8 students and there are probably 8 people who teach in the program. Me, you, Marcia, Alan, Cynthia, Tim, Rahul, so 7.
And Deb.
And Deb, right, so there are 8, yes. And then there are even more thesis advisors. So David is advising a thesis. And your thesis advisor is someone who you work with starting right around now, usually mid to late October, early November, when you finalize a thesis topic. And then you work with your thesis advisor in a one-on-one basis until the thesis is done. And the sort of dynamics of that relationship are left up to the advisor and the student to navigate, but it's not unusual at all to meet with your thesis advisor, especially in the spring, once a week and sit down and work through whatever issues you're having, really work on a very granular level on the text. So in terms of faculty relationships, that's probably the single closest relationship that you will have. I guess one last thing I just want to say before we open it up to questions is that another thing we've tried to do over the last couple of years at the GPSW, in addition to really focusing on what our students do after they leave here, is engage with larger issues in science and in the science writing world. Tom and I were both involved in an effort a couple of years ago called the Solutions Summit, which dealt with issues of equality and harassment in science writing. That was something that was at MIT that we worked on with a number of other people in the field in the wake of some sexual harassment issues that arose in the science blogging world and in the larger science world. This year, that is again something that we have spent a lot of time discussing and focusing on within the program. Issues of fair pay, of minority representation within science journalism, of power dynamics in science journalism are things that we are not only engaging with our students, but we think that MIT has the potential to play a role on a larger scale. And that's something that we'll be continuing to do in the years to come. So unless you guys, do you want to?
A couple things. First of all, again, I'm Tom Levinson. I'm not sure if we introduced ourselves fully. I have a background in journalism, book writing, and filmmaking, and came to MIT in 2005. But two things. One is in terms of...
How many books have you written? Scaling them out also.
I'm on to my 6th.
And have done a lot of films and won prizes for those too.
Yes, I have.
Which I always feel very diminished whenever I have to describe my colleagues here.
He lied, or he misleads. But there are two things about our program that are important. One is, and Seth sort of touched on this, is this is a professional program. You know, it's not it's trade programs like law school, business school, or what have you. We want you to come out of here fully equipped to have a thriving professional career, and that flows through the program in a variety of ways. The internship, for example, is not just a summer thing. The actual preparation for the internship begins in September.
Yeah.
We work on developing CVs and cover letters, and the way you present yourself to the outside world. We pay for you to go to the AAAS conference, which is both a major science writing, the big science writing conference, general science conference, not science writing, at which there is an internship fair. It's the biggest collection of science journalists from all over the world show up in the press room, which is itself a networking opportunity, but there's also explicitly folks from a wide range of publications show up and interview everyone from all the different science writing programs who show up, and we make sure that you guys get there. And you know, over the course of the year, we'll be discussing different aspects of what it takes to be a thriving, successful, non-completely stressed out, non-only ramen-eating science writer. The other thing is, and this is, you know, there are several other science writing programs, as you know, and I'm sure many of you are planning to apply to several or all of them. And we generally get asked, what's the difference between ours and theirs, if any? And I'm not going to answer that now because I'm going to let you ask it, but if it is a question in your mind, please do ask it because there's a very important answer. Okay?
It's not telling you what to ask or anything.
We would never do that.
So yeah, so we could, I have plenty more things I could go on about, I'm sure we all could, but why don't, I know all of your time is valuable and limited, so why don't we address any questions that you might have? Yes?
I would love to know what the difference is between the background and the other science.
Well done.
There you go. All right.
You want to take it?
You're in.
Yeah. There are science writing programs that are housed inside schools of journalism, and there are science writing programs like ours that are not. All of them emphasize journalism, and for very good reason. Some because they're really specifically trained journalists, and others like ourselves, and I would say especially like ourselves, because I think we collectively as a faculty in this institution see journalism and science writing in the same relation that mathematics and physics exist, right? You know, we want you to have the ability to treat science writing as whatever your talent and interest and passion leads you to. If you're an obligate essayist, we want you to be prepared to do good essays. If you really want to write, you know, long-form poetic nature writing, a la Helen Macdonald or what have you, we want you to be able to really focus on that and study that here. But all those, if you want to be, you know, the next great filmmaker who will make us all forget Powers of 10 and every other great science documentary, by all means, we would love for you to do that, and we'll try and prepare you, start you on that path. But all of those things require a core of skill that really comes only with a rock-solid grounding in news reporting, in identifying stories, in working with sources, in learning to evaluate claims either set down in paper or made to you by somebody. All the things that reporters do for daily and weekly journalism. So the biggest difference in terms of pedagogy is that we regard journalism as both an end in itself and as the foundation for a wide range of other things to do, and we want to make sure that you get both, right? And the other thing that really differentiates our program from everyone else, and it's, you know, you can't weigh this too heavily in my biased opinion, is that the MIT Science Writing Program is at MIT. There is a real difference in the experience you get by being at the epicenter of one of the world's great centers of inquiry and research. You don't have to go anywhere to be engaged in that process. If
Well, you need to go across the
you
courtyard.
need to go across there, or you need to go, you know, next door in if you're in student housing. If you're in graduate student housing, most of the graduate students around you won't be graduate students in science writing. They'll be doing random cog, they'll be doing computer science, they'll be doing mechanical engineering, whatever it may be, and you know, you are steeped in that stuff here, and it's immensely valuable.
And it's something that we are a very small program, obviously, within the MIT firmament, but we're a program that MIT places a lot of value in, frankly, and takes very seriously. And I don't know of any situation where one of our students or a documentary team has approached a scientist here and been told, no, I won't talk to you. And that includes, you know, documentaries on Nobel Prize laureates, taking a lot of their time and spending a lot of time with them. One of Tom's teams did a documentary on the coldest place in the universe, which is at MIT. And
Just over there.
and the Nobel laureate, right?
Wolfgang Ketterle.
Who was the subject of that, came to our thesis day so he could see the film, and then said it was as good a description and explanation of his work as he had ever seen. He obviously did not need to come to our thesis day. I assume he's a pretty busy guy. But I think that is a real benefit to being here. One other difference, all of the different programs have slightly different focuses even within the journalism that they do. I think we are traditionally known as having a little bit more of an emphasis on long form work and narrative work. And that's something we believe in and care a lot about. We also have, again, just the way that we are and have looked at the entirety of our curriculum with an emphasis on how it can best serve students when they leave here. We changed, last year for the first time, we changed our thesis from a 10,000 word project to a 6,000 word project. The primary reason being that 10,000 words is a length that does not exist comfortably in the wild. There are a vanishingly small number of pieces that are written at that length in American journalism. And so our feeling was that the amount of reporting you need to do for 6,000 words and 10,000 words is probably around the same. But structuring a 6,000 word narrative is different from a 10,000 word narrative, and you're much more likely to be writing 6,000 word narratives than you are 10,000 word narratives. Yeah, and I guess also building on what Tom said about journalism being the foundation of what we do, but not being only what we do, we are constantly thinking about and looking for ways to introduce students to the widest variety of possible ways they can make a living doing this. So immediately before I came down here, I was meeting with a science writer who has, for the last several years, made a significant portion of his income working with scientists, writing books with them, either as a co-author or as not really a ghostwriter, but someone in the acknowledgments who's acknowledged as the writer. That person's going to come in and talk to our students about that. We are very aware. I'm also on the board of the National Association of Science Writers, and one thing we discuss there a lot is this sort of porousness of the boundaries in what science writers do these days. Part of their income might be working for an institution or a lab, and another part of it might be doing journalism, or more traditional journalism. And we want to help you explore all of those different options. We promise that all of our answers won't be that long.
Is the gentleman who's coming in to talk about co-authoring, is that open to the public?
Probably not. That will probably just be as part of the class. But I haven't scheduled that yet, so I can, if you leave me your information, I'll let you know. One thing we are actually looking to do more of, and I've just applied for some more funding for, is doing more public events that are aimed at our students but are open to the public. We try and bring in as many outside journalists and writers as possible. And when possible, we would like those to be open to the larger sort of science writing community. And that's something also our faculty and staff is also very involved in the larger local and national science writing community. I'm on the board of the NASW. Tim Deschamps is one of the founders and driving forces behind SWINACAMA. Do any of you know about SWINACAMA? It stands for Science Writers in and Around Cambridge, Massachusetts. That is a once-a-month gathering, usually at a bar in Cambridge. I've been at SWINACAMAs when there have been upwards of 30 different people. We want our students to be part of that local and national community as quickly as possible.
Also, if you guys don't know about it, the MIT Communication Forum, which Seth also directs,
True.
has this November 30th. It has, over the course of the semester, you do 2?
3 a semester, yeah.
So the last one this semester is Has Silicon Valley Lost Its Humanity? Which is an interesting, if you answer yes right away, you're probably going to best. But it's Noam Cohen, who is a
He's a former New York Times, he's a former colleague of mine. We worked together for a while, former New York Times technology columnist, who's written a new book called The Know-It-Alls. And he'll be with Jeff Howe, who teaches at Northeastern. He coined the term crowdsourcing in a 2006 piece for Wired. He also just co-wrote a book with Jody Ito, who runs the MIT Media Lab. That is free and open to the public, November 30th at, I think, 6 p.m.
6 to 8, room 3270.
Yeah, if you go to comforum.mit.edu, all the information is there.
But the point being, that is an ongoing public series
Yeah.
in which both topics about science for popular audiences, but also sometimes combined or sometimes as discrete fora, issues of craft and science writing are discussed. So put that on your list if you happen to be in our area.
Other questions?
Yes.
I've covered, I've written more about environmental justice issues from a social justice lens, particularly climate change, and I've been looking at this program to get more technical grounding and being able to write about it and also do radio, since I like radio. So would that be something that is...
And when you say technical grounding, do you mean in the science or in...
In the science around climate change, but not, also write for a wider audience.
Right.
So that's what...
So, I guess the answer is yes and yes, depending on how you structure your program here. You have 2 electives. In addition to electives, there's a lot of other programming that happens at MIT. So certainly you could decide that you want to sort of design a mini track for yourself in your electives and focus on this one thing and find courses that deal with that. In terms of technical grounding, if I'm understanding your question correctly, meaning writing about those issues less as an activist and more as a journalist, or having, that's absolutely that's sort of the bread and butter of what we do. Not training activists to write as journalists, but training people to do journalism. Right. In terms of our student body, usually it just happens to break down this way. This is not a division that we look for, but usually roughly half of our students have an undergraduate training in the humanities and half in the sciences. Some portion of our students, probably around half, also have some journalism experience, either for their college newspaper or after school in some sort of job. That is not a requirement, certainly. So plenty of students come here without having had real experience in journalism. The things that we look for on your application, sort of the top 10 things we look for, is writing ability. We feel like we can train you in journalism, but we don't feel like in a year we can teach you to sort of be a basically competent writer and also train you in journalism. So I guess maybe those are the top 5 things, and then 6 through 10 are a sustained interest in science and communicating about science. So we've had beautiful writers apply, no evidence in anything they've done that they're interested in science at all. And we generally say this might not be the right program for you, or at least we want to see a little bit more out of that. In terms of applications, because we are a small program and we can deal with our applications on a pretty intimate level, if there are things in your application that you are concerned about, just let us know. We've had students apply who just shot the bed one year in college for whatever reason. That might not be a technical term. But, you know, there was something going on in their life, or they hadn't quite gotten their bearings, or and we don't want to have to guess about that. Just tell us. We had one of our, he was a student the first year I got here, an incredible student and a wonderful person, had either dropped out or flunked out of college. And then 8 or 10 years later, gone back and finished up and told us, you know, I screwed up and I flunked out of college and this is why, and I reapplied and here's why I think I'd be good for your program, and that was great. Same with your GREs. Some people don't take tests well. That's fine. You are not going to be taking a lot of multiple choice tests as a journalist or as a science writer. So again, we want to see that, you know, if you're in the lower fifth percentile or something, that might be an issue. But we don't have a GRE cutoff point. We don't have a GPA cutoff point. You know, we want you to explain and show us why you're here, but please don't apply or don't let us know about things you think we should know about. Yeah.
And you said that you encourage students to use the January time period to travel and to try to do things that are related to their thesis.
Yeah.
Do you help them set up a formal internship during that time if they need to be at a particular place?
So since I've been here, certainly we haven't had a student do an internship, and I think we would probably discourage that because the thesis is sort of a work of journalism, essentially, and so we wouldn't want you to have that type of working relationship with your subjects. We have had students who have done internships in the spring instead of an elective, and gotten credit for who wanted to do an extra internship. And we will do what we can short of kind of calling people for you to make sure that you can set up interviews, and we do help you out financially with that travel. But
Yeah. No, the idea of a thesis is like, you know, any academic thesis. It's, you know, original research and construction of a story or argument that you make. So the idea is you find your subjects, and you can engage with them in all kinds of ways. I mean, the person who went to Fiji was doing a fascinating story on a sort of mystery and anomaly about ocean acidification as a result of
who was
climate
that?
change.
Was that Josh?
You would ask me that. I think it was Josh.
Or did he go to Palau? That's yeah, okay.
It's in the Fiji archipelago.
Yeah.
Which is a great word. And he embedded with the scientists, and
Right.
you know, but he wasn't working for them. He wasn't delivering materials to them, and we would, I think, emphatically discourage that. We want you to be doing your story, not, you know, doing theirs.
Right. Yeah.
Hi, I have a question. My name is Scully Wong. I'm from the MIT Press.
Uh-huh.
My question is about, I'm actually wondering, is the business science writing also considered a part of science writing. Like if I want to draft up a SWOT analysis or marketing feasibility analysis for the MIT Press in terms of how to open up the new international market for the press.
Right.
So is there any kind of a particular skills that I can learn from the science writing program about that part?
So, two answers. The business of science writing is a part of our curriculum, but I think not in the way that you're asking. So we do, we have class sessions and we deal specifically with things like taxes as a freelancer,
Cool.
How to invoice, if you're a freelancer, how to invoice people, what to do if you don't get paid, how to navigate ethical issues that might come up. We don't do that sort of we don't address and don't try to address that sort of more marketing angle or coming up with business plans or marketing plans.
So
that's,
it's more about business ethics.
yeah, business ethics and also the just what is going to be, what information you're going to need to know, since increasingly these days science writers are essentially operating as their own sort of individual entity, what you need to know in order to do that. So, does it make sense to form an LLC, a limited liability corporation, and get paid through an LLC as opposed to just getting checks and, how do you keep tax records, that type of stuff. Yeah, sure. Of course.
Yeah, since I'm working at press, and I actually am not coming from any mathematical or engineering background. I'm an MBA background, and the MIT Press and I am actually I am like starting this proposal to open up the new international market in mainland China in MIT Press. It is a well accepted proposal. I wanted to do that as well. So one of my major ideas is that I wanted to build up this entirely brand new website in Chinese version of MIT Press in China, and I'm going to set up the social media launching programs over there. So in order to make exactly the same content or format of the Chinese version of MIT Press website, I wanted to introduce all kinds of titles in technologies and sciences in the language of Chinese,
right.
Which means that I really I think I'm probably the only one be able to do that because I'm bilingual. And so I think I'm just wondering, is there any kind of like particular trainings or skills that I can learn from this program to help me to do this part? Like if I want to introduce some publications from the United States, from some scholars in the MIT about thermodynamics or neurosciences, but I'm from the MBA background.
Right.
Before starting my training here, I wouldn't know how to do that. So I'm just wondering, what kind of experience or professional training that you guys can offer me to actually do this work?
This is tough because my instinct is always to say, yes, we do that. But I don't think we do. I'm not sure that we would be able to help you do that in a way that would be a good, the most sort of economical use of your time. It's not the type of thing that our faculty is experienced in. I mean, if you look at our backgrounds are all in communicating science and being the conduit from the scientist to the general public. So I think that might be a little bit out of our area of expertise. Yep.
Actually, what I mean is that I just wanted to know that since if I am writing all these introductions of all the books from the MIT Press, and I want to publish these books in the Chinese market, so I definitely need to write up this like a brief introduction.
Oh, so if you want to write introductions
to the general
right.
public in China,
Right.
I'm just wondering if I can apply the skills I learned from this program into that.
Sure. I mean, in the sense that all of the skills that you learn in this program are focused on being that conduit from a technical expertise to the general public.
Okay.
So yes, I think the skill set could be applicable. We wouldn't be doing that specific type of work, so you wouldn't have an assignment where you have a manuscript and are asked to write an introduction for it for a general audience. But yeah, in a more broad sense, that skill set certainly.
It's nice, it's helped. Thank you.
Great, yeah. Yeah, wait, actually, one in the back, yeah.
Like, I would imagine, like, in, like, the science writing program, that it'd be very helpful for us to have, like, a background in statistics, or to know it on, like, a basic level. Are there any resources that you guys would recommend in doing that?
Yes, that is a very good question, and it actually reminds me that there is one other part of our curriculum that we left out, and that is a small unit Alan Lightman teaches on numerical literacy and numeracy. And what we hope to accomplish with that is giving you a basic sort of comfort level with statistics, with p-values, with the type of concepts and ideas that you're likely to encounter. So that's not going to be a substitute for an entire statistics course, but that we have that segment specifically for that purpose. Yeah.
Do you guys research or do you collaborate with anyone to figure out methods for driving more readership and viewership to science writing, science productions? As you know, obviously there's like regular SEO for like, you know,
Right.
it drives traffic anywhere, but do you guys focus in specifically on how doing that for science writing is different?
So we don't have a part of our program. I mean, there are aspects in several of the different units where we talk about audience engagement, and that's something Tim deals a lot with, how to write headlines that'll draw in an audience. If you're talking about a more analytical study of that, that is not something that we have done, or at least at this juncture are probably not in a position to do. I mean, we have broad ambitions and a lot of different things that we would like to institute. Again, right now, our focus is, in terms of our ambitions, our focus is on whatever money we get, we're putting into student aid. So once we are able to fully fund our students, then there are other programs that we'll look at, but that is our focus right now. I view it as a moral issue. I think that if you are going into science writing and science communication, we do not want you to start out your career with any debt. We're not able to guarantee that yet, but that's our focus in terms of where we're expanding.
And on the search optimization thing, you look at what where our program lands in the sort of sequence of a science writing, an invented science writing piece. We're trying to train people who will do that very well. For
The
the
best
most,
driver is the best
but
writer.
the best driver is the best writer, but also for the most part, there, very few people, especially in things like YouTubes and so, YouTube channels and so forth. But even though there are exceptions, very few people are their own publishers. And so, I'm not sure if we've fully conveyed, the year is incredibly intense.
Yeah.
We hope it's fun, we hope it's valuable, but it's really demanding. And people end the year saying variations on, I'm really glad to have done it. Right? So there are aspects of the business side of science writing that are important. But it's like one of our students is now a fairly senior managing type editor at is it Popular Mechanics or Popular Science?
Popular mechanics.
Popular Mechanics. And he has, over the course of a decade, worked his way up into a very senior position where he is doing, exactly this kind of work, budgets and strategy and marketing. But that's something that happens actually at a stage of your career later than the ones we're preparing you for.
Well, actually, before I go on for that, I know David is very, very busy. Does anyone have any last or first or intermediate questions for him? Because I want to let him get back to his work. Yeah.
Interested, I'm coming from a freelance background. I've been writing on water and climate change for the last 3 years, while traveling mostly on my bicycle in like 16 countries.
Okay.
And I do audio recordings but wondering, I feel like I've got the basics of freelancing down, and I'm wondering how much it would be possible to gain from a program like this, or if it's better to just kind of keep doing what I'm doing.
Okay, and do you want David to address that?
Well, I'm
specifically?
also curious about the fellowships because they're not open this year, but when will they be open?
I think people learn a great deal from this program, in my experience. And there's probably, you're not really just learning the basics of freelancing. You're taking advantage of this campus and what it has to offer. You're learning skills like audio production and video production, and you're mingling with professional journalists in our program. So I would say, it's certainly not something to dismiss out of hand, even though you have some solid professional experience.
When is the deadline for the KSJ fellowships?
To apply, not until March.
Okay,
Yes.
so the applications for the academic year 2018-2019 are due in March for that. So after they're due for our program, which is January 15th. But does anyone have any other questions for David? I can let him go and I can answer your question.
Just really quickly, what's your email?
Pardon me?
Your email address.
Dacorc, DACORC @MIT.edu. Great, I hope to hear from you.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Sure.
I'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely.
So say your question again. So you've been traveling around and doing audio work primarily?
And writing.
And writing,
I'm
okay.
a producer for the Interchange
Uh-huh.
podcast folks and doing the transition right now. So I'm just wondering, I think longer term goals, I would love to not be doing freelance and
Uh-huh.
in a staff writing type capacity. But wondering, yeah, just what, do you get many people who are applying having already had a significant
Yeah,
freelance
that's
experience?
an excellent question.
Or is it that
Yeah.
you're kind of preparing people to be freelancers afterwards and just change?
Well, first of all, I mean, we're definitely not just preparing people to be freelancers. In fact, despite the fact that it is staff jobs, I think the overall number of staff jobs in the field has declined recently. We still have a very robust portion of our graduating class every year that get staff jobs at places. So I don't want it to sound as if what we are training you for is a freelance career. We are training you for whatever you want to do, while recognizing the reality that it is more likely now than it was a decade ago that especially starting out, your career is going to be made up of doing different things at different times. We certainly have had and have students who have significant experience in journalism. We've had students who have spent 5 or 10 years in journalism and wanted to get a grounding in science journalism. We have had students who were in science journalism in one specific area and wanted to both learn more and make themselves be more obvious candidates for a wider type of job. That's a sort of broad answer to that. I think probably the best thing for you to do, or one good thing for you to do, would be just to look at our curriculum, and we can show you, I can give you our curriculum. And you can see, does this feel like, all right, I know all of this, or is this something that would be useful? We have had, not infrequently at all, night fellows wanting to take our courses, which we typically do not allow anyone outside of the program to take the advanced science writing seminar. So, those are people who are mid-career journalists. But I would take a look at the curriculum, and then I'm also happy to, you can contact me if you have specific questions, like I'm interested in X, Y, and Z, and would it be useful? Because I hope you all apply. If it's not right for you, I'm not going to tell you to come here. we are invested in having this being the right fit for the students and the students being the right fit for us. We don't want you to spend a year of your life here if this is not what's right for you, for sure. And there's been students I've told, like, this is not the right program for you. Incredibly smart, gifted people that I hope I get to work with one day. That just for whatever reason, it's not the right program for them.
I'd add to that a couple things. First of all, there are a lot of reasons to go to a science writing program. There are the Polonius's reasons, right? The pragmatic ones. It's a networking tool, and it's credential. I mean, having an MIT degree is not a bad thing in a lot of professional settings. Those aren't sufficient reasons to come here, but they are reasons. They have some. The other thing that I would say, and it's also true for the other science writing programs. It is a credential. It's a year of your life to get some kind of engagement with the community and all that in an institution. The two more, I think, soulful reasons to go to MIT or to any program that is right for you, should you choose, should you feel that somewhere else works, are number one, a graduate program in journalism or science writing or creative writing is a year of essentially safe space in which you try things, you learn things, you can, if you find that you are not as good as you would like to be in a given area, you can work on it, over and over again and get better. It's a way to get good in a low consequence environment, right? It's not like you send a piece of crap to your first editor and that person never wants to work with you again.
Right.
So, and the other thing is that here very strongly, and I suspect everywhere else, the student makes their education. So if you come here with a certain level of experience and skill, that's where your professors and your classmates meet you. So it's not like, you should only come here if you're a beginner. Not at all. We've had people who are really wonderful writers who come here. And
with a lot of experience.
With a lot of experience, exactly. And they hopefully become better from it. They seem to value it.
That covered it pretty well. I mean, Tom touched on one thing that I think has been a tension in our program over the last couple of years, as we have simultaneously, we've tried to find a way to thread the needle between having you come out of here with clips and not focusing on getting clips while you're here, because we do want you to feel free to fall on your face. And so, especially for the thesis, oftentimes students will be thinking very early on, where can I place this? And we do have right now a student who just graduated. Her thesis is right now going through editing at The Atlantic. But that is not something that we emphasize on your thesis the way we do with news stories. Because for a lot of our students, this is the first time they're writing a 6,000 word piece. And I would rather see students be very ambitious and not quite succeed, but feel more confident moving forward than be much less ambitious and succeed entirely.
Everyone graduates with enough clips. I mean, there are lots of different ways things get published. We have a relationship with Technology Review. Right. They particularly are interested in our digging, in our archival pieces, because they often are derived from
somewhere between 2 and 5 a year get published.
That's correct.
And those are also, you get paid for that also.
And the lab experience pieces that come out of it also often end up in Tech Review.
Right.
There are lots of, there are Nova now, students place pieces very broadly. Our students, it varies some by the class, and often there's one entrepreneurial catalyst who brings the rest of the classmates along. But the idea of having enough of a professional portfolio, that's not something you should worry about. The question is what, is the Jell-O we sell here the Jell-O you want to eat?
Right. Yeah.
In terms of portfolios, if you have a large existing portfolio, How many pieces do you guys want to see in the application?
We want to see your best pieces.
Yeah.
3 or 4 is typical. Some people send a few more, some people only send 2. That's kind of a risk. I mean,
3 is a good.
3 is a good rule.
Yeah, I mean, we want to see good judgment in both directions. So like there was a student once who submitted 50 some odd pages, and my initial thought was this might be great, but it does not show great judgment because I'm not going to read 30 clips by this person.
Did we miss that person?
I don't remember.
I think so. I remember that.
I mean, we did read them, but so yeah, somewhere between 3 and 4 samples. But there's no, it also depends on how long they are and
What they, I mean, first of all, if you have questions about that, it's not a black box. You can contact
Yeah.
Shannon, you can contact
Right.
us. Secondly, what Seth said is really true. The first thing we look at, and the most important aspect of your application, is your writing. And you have 3, pots of writing. There's each of the 2 essays, which are very important. They're ways for you to, introduce yourself in your voice and convey a couple of really important things. Why you want to be here, what you expect out of it, and how well you handle the basic idea of engaging with technically complex material and delivering it to a broad audience. That's what those 2 essays do. And then there's the examples of your writing. And you're right. You look at, try and put yourselves, when you're putting your application together, in our shoes. We see you only as an electronic folder of 15 or 20 pages. That's all we know about you. What do we need to know to say that, we just got to have you here? So look for samples that convey your voice, your intelligence, your knowledge of the craft of writing, and your ability to convey science. And if you, and different pieces can do different things, and if you want to, many people do this. You can write a piece specifically for the application.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's not unusual at all for people to, especially someone who has not done a lot of writing about science, to write a piece specifically for the application, a piece of journalism, an essay. So
one piece of free and gratis advice, in your application, it's always a good idea to give us a plausible reason to believe that you actually really love science writing and want to do
yes.
it. And one of the ways to do that is to tell us who your models are, tell us who you inspired, tell us who you read.
Especially if it's one of us.
Yeah, well,
That's a joke. Don't, although I think actually, I shouldn't say this because we did end up letting this person in, but don't misspell one of our names.
that's always a good one. But seriously, you can tell, you tell a lot about great writers by who they read and who they said they model themselves on. You can tell a lot about aspiring writers. And it tells us, what sort of person you, what sort of, science writer you want to be, and it gives you a measure of whether this program is right for you and vice versa.
Are there any questions in the weird part that I'm missing? No? And Shannon, have we gotten any questions in? No? Okay. Yeah.
Me?
Yeah.
I have a practical question.
Sure.
I live in southern New Hampshire. I have a job and I have a house.
Okay.
If I come here, I'm going to be giving up at least one of those 2 things.
Yes.
As an older person, I'm just wondering, have you had a student that has made that work in a similar situation?
So how far away in southern New Hampshire?
I'm 62 miles from here.
I mean, we had a student who lived in Providence that ended up not being ideal, but probably not because he lived in Providence. We do not require you to live in Cambridge. It's an intense program, and I think it makes sense to be here for as much as possible outside of just the class hours. It would be, out of those 2 things, I think the job would probably be what would go. I mean, we found that 10 hours a week is kind of the limit for the amount that students can work outside of their program. And some students find that to be too much. It's just, I mean, it's again, one of these balance things. We decided, and we continue to decide that philosophically we would rather this be a one-year program to limit the amount of time that you're out of the workforce, to limit the number of semesters you're paying tuition. The flip side of that is it's hard to, to work even a 20-hour-a-week job outside of that. But certainly living in southern New Hampshire would not be disqualifying from our end, and should not, would not mean that you would not get everything out of the program that you wanted.
I would be willing to stay here during the week and then, go home
Sure,
and mow
yeah.
on the weekends, whatever.
Yeah, right.
So the other part, do you have an idea of the approximate acceptance rate for applications?
It really, because it's such a small program, it depends. I mean, the difference, if we get 10 more applications one year, that changes things dramatically. Usually we are somewhere between 50 and 65 applications a year, and we typically let in 9 or 10 people, and then 1 or 2 people on the wait list. We, again, want we think our sweet spot is 8 students. I think since I've been here, we've had as few as 7 or 6 and as many as 9. But 8 is what we shoot for.
Thank you.
Yeah.
In the past, I know there's been some really innovative.
I'm sorry, wait.
In the past, I know there's been some innovative audio collaborations at the List Visual Arts Center. I was wondering if there's any precedent for kind of more arts involvement on campus with the science writing program, or if it would be possible to set up a relationship.
So I guess there are 2 answers to that. One, once you're at MIT, it's possible for you to do anything that you can at MIT. And we've had students be involved in very different and very intimately involved with very different aspects of the Institute once they've been here. We don't, and so if you came up with a thesis that involved collaboration with the List Center, that and made sense to us as a thesis, we would support that and try to make that happen. There's not a lot of room in our curriculum as it stands to sort of create new partnerships. But the thesis is, I mean, that's 25% of your coursework and a lot of your time. So that is an area that is sort of open for you to do what you want to with it, as long as we all sign off on it. I always, we have had students do kind of 3-part newspaper series. I am always advocating for people to think as broadly as possible as they can about the thesis. And oftentimes, students just end up sort of coming back to the long-form narrative piece. But we have had students here, we had a student here a couple of years ago who her thesis advisor was the director of the MIT Museum, because that was what she was interested in doing, and that was the type of work she was interested in doing. And so, as long as it's nonfiction, we're open to it.
And to add, there's also, there is some explicit opportunities here. I mean, for example, again with the MIT Museum has a studio actually right at the very heart of campus, right in Building 10, directly on the ground floor underneath the dome. And there is a course in science communication and sort of public engagement, which is basically a course in constructing, in how,
Building museum exhibits.
Building museum exhibits. So you can absolutely do, build an art, craft, and science project that way.
And also, just MIT is a weird place.
Got a quote on that.
And this is a very busy time, but I would encourage you to embrace whatever aspect of that weirdness you can. I last year joined the MIT Glass Band, which is a band, all of our instruments are made in the glass lab here. I broke one during our only concert last year and bled all over the stage, but that's been one of the most fun things I've done here. There's a lot, this is a unique place, and you should embrace that while you're here. Is there a question in the back? No? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So my question is actually regarding my personal career as a published writer, and I just recently published a sci-fi novel, and I'm on the path of just making it a film. And yeah, so I have been wondering, Professor, can I have your name, please? I was late.
Levinson.
Levinson. Hi, Tom Levinson, right?
Yeah.
Tom. Cool. I heard about that you have this filmmaking background as well. I'm just wondering, is it does it include the film writing? The scripts writing?
Not fictional script writing, feature?
Yeah.
No. I've always worked in nonfiction.
Okay. Cool.
And I've written plenty of documentary scripts, but that's not quite the same thing.
Sure, but if I got into the program and I want to make my master thesis about the fiction writing, can I get some? No.
No, the only requirement is it has to be nonfiction.
Non-fiction.
Yeah.
Okay. Non-fiction.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
There are great fiction teachers here.
Great science fiction.
Great science fiction teachers and professors, and you can take those courses as electives.
Oh, cool. You have these courses. Cool. Thank
but
You can take these courses as a staff member at MIT, actually.
if you work for MIT, you can also take them.
You don't have to, if it's at MIT and you work at MIT, you don't necessarily have to be part of a program. You can do that as part of your employee
But
benefits.
I wanted degree. That's the honor.
If you-
Yeah, that's a separate, yeah.
Okay.
But, yes.
So this is directed at both of you. As folks who write impactful stuff, what's your favorite way to gauge how much impact you're having with a piece or with a series? I mean, with like standard scholarly journals, you can look at your citation
Sure,
count and stuff like
right.
that. What is your favorite metric?
Oh, God. Well,
Apart from paychecks.
That's my favorite series.
it's, it's different for different, I write books, and the metrics for books are on one hand easy, how many do you sell? Or how many reviews do you get? Or, how many prizes do you get nominated for or win? These are all different metrics.
What's your personal?
My
How do you get emotional satisfaction that you're making a difference in the world, I guess is.
So, from my perspective, first of all, I try not to tie my emotional satisfaction too much with the immediate feedback I get, because oftentimes I found with my work, I'll get some of the most meaningful feedback I'll get is months or years later. I can give you for instance, I think in 2000 and either 14 or 15, I wrote a piece for the New Yorker about a child who was the first ever case of a rare disease. Last month, I got an email from a woman who lived in California who had only read my piece a couple months before, had contacted one of the geneticists in the piece after reading it, and had gotten a diagnosis for her 35-year-old daughter, who was born deaf, had become progressively blind. They had no idea what she had. And after reading my piece and contacting this geneticist, she got into a clinical trial that sequenced her daughter, and she found out what the condition was.
That's really wonderful.
Yeah, that was one of the, that it was just an incredibly moving message to receive. I spent a long time talking to her, that's again either 2 or 3 years after that piece came out. For me, for a lot of what I write, it's hearing from, especially because recently I've been writing about sick children in one way or another from parents. And oftentimes it's not even just like we got this answer, but how meaningful it was to know that there was someone else in their same boat. And for that reason, I've tried not to look at like how many comments a piece is getting, or after my first book, I swore and have stuck to it. I have never checked an Amazon ranking.
Nicely done.
Just because I think that way lies madness. You know, I mean, if it goes up, then I'm wondering why it's not going up more, and if it goes down, then I think that says something about my self-worth. Or
Seth is a stronger man than I am. He is absolutely right about that. Nothing good happens from looking at an Amazon ranking. You know, I'd say essentially the same thing. One of the weirdest ways I knew my book had reached some kind of, a book of mine had reached some kind of audience beyond the, I mean, one of the things I like to do is see if I can reach beyond the usual science writing get at. And the personal note I got from Carl Rove about my book about Isaac Newton, you know, Carl and I don't share a lot of perspectives, but that was, you know, that was interesting. That means the book found its way to a place much of my work does not, and that was kind of fun. I got a note for some stuff I did in the Boston Globe from a senior political leader, much more of my persuasion.
Elizabeth Warren.
And that was, you know, and she said she was going to use that in her work in the Senate. And I said, well, that's, you know, it's a Boston Globe piece. It's, you know, it's fish wrap. It's, you know, it's published Sunday and then it goes away again. But, you know, and the thing is, absolutely no way to predict any of that.
Right.
You know, and so I write because there are things that fascinate me or bother me about the world. And so, yes, in that sense, I want to change the world because I'm going to respond to that feeling and then get it out there. But I don't write to change the world. I write to respond to these things that have somehow caught my attention or angered me or excited me and given me joy or have mostly perplexed me. I mean, it's like that's weird. I want to know more about it.
And if you take the time to figure out why, then you're like, well, I already did the work. I might as well write about it, right?
Something like that. But, you know, and then, you know, it's like you release your child into the wilderness, and you hope it has a good life, and you hope it touches lots of people, and you hope it comes back to you in some interesting way. But to sort of set the times I've sort of said, I want this to be my bestseller, what have you, you just don't get to do that. I mean, maybe some people can, but I don't know how.
Thank you.
Would we be able to do like a image portfolio as well for the application, or?
An image portfolio?
Yeah.
Photographs or
You can, as long as you submit the essays, you can also submit supplementary material. We had a student submit a song.
We had another student submit a book she wrote when she was 8 years old. That was not a terribly successful application,
Yes.
but she did submit it.
But so, you know, again, what Tom said earlier, just think about, view your application as putting forth your best version of yourself. And so if you think that an image portfolio communicates something essential about your commitment to science and science communication, then submit it. But, you know, obviously we're not a visual program. So
We are a little bit.
I mean, yes, we're not a photography program. There were you and then you, yeah.
Is there any advantage, disadvantage for like coming right out of undergraduate school?
It's a great question. No. I think our average age is probably somewhere between 25 and 27. And oftentimes there's somewhere between a quarter and half the class that's right out of school. And then there's usually one or two students that are in their early 30s or older. So I would say it depends on what your goals are. From my own personal philosophy is if you think you might take a year off at some point, do, because that gets harder and harder to do. So, you know, the further away you move from having completed your undergraduate education. But we don't look at people who are right out of college or people who are not right out of college as being any better or worse in terms of their application. It just depends on where you are. Yeah.
It doesn't look like there is, but I just wanted to double check. There's no second stage to the application process, like an interview?
No, so we will sometimes contact you and talk to you, especially if there are some questions we have, but there's not a mandatory interview after that. We probably end up talking to maybe somewhere between 2 and 4 of the people that we admit beforehand, either because they have questions or we have questions. And then we talk to everyone, this is probably obvious, but in between when we accept them and when they need to make their choice. If for nothing else, to talk about financial aid. You can always schedule a time to talk to us, but it's not a required part of the application. Yeah.
Just kind of a technical question about the application. There's the financial support section, and I was curious if that was just kind of like a standard part of the application or if it has a real role.
So that is an excellent, excellent question. If you have any vague notion that you might need financial support, say you need financial support. There is no benefit to not saying that you need it, except that then we won't be able to give it to you. We do not look at that and say, oh, this person said they don't need financial support. Great, we'll admit them and then won't need to worry about that. If you need support or if you think you might need support, check that off. It does not affect your likelihood of getting in one iota.
Which is to say, everyone should check that box.
Yes, right, exactly.
And the other thing is,
unless there's a Rockefeller is really rich anymore. Unless there's a...
I mean, if you really don't, then don't. But the other thing is, you should know that almost all of the admissions committee does not know whether you check the box even. It's not Seth will know because he's head of the program, but everybody else on the committee
does not know.
It has zero bearing.
And I don't look, I mean, even I can know, it really has absolutely no bearing whatsoever. So, yeah.
And then there was the average GRE score that the current students who are enrolled in the program last year.
Is there? Oh, we don't collect that information. I mean, it really is like, again, in terms of your GREs, if there's some really glaring issue with your GREs, then we might look at that. But we don't view the GREs as a very strong indicator of your likelihood of success in the program.
Can I use GMAT to replace GRE in the application?
What?
Can I use my GMAT score to replace GRE?
No. Shannon is saying no.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I'm coming from a lab, and there's a section about publications, and my name comes up on publications. I didn't personally write those publications. I did a lot of work towards them. Is it worth putting those in that section? I mean, they'll come up on my CV probably. But...
Yeah, I mean, we certainly don't do a publication check for you. If it's not, what we want to know there is what you've written. So you can certainly say, I was involved. We all know what it means to be in a lab, but that's sort of up to you. But it won't make a big difference either way.
But just as a bearing on your background in science, you could put there something like, see my CV for scientific publications.
Right. Yeah.
Just you are fully welcome to draw attention to the fact that you've actually done some science.
Right. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask more about the student community. I mean, I think one of the reasons why these small programs appeal to me so much is that intimacy, and I know you spoke about the relationship between teacher and student being very intimate, but I wanted to sort of get your impression on the students' interaction with each other and collaboration and stuff.
So we wish that we could, had such acumen in reading people's personalities that we could set up the perfect class every year. The reality is it varies year to year. I think we have more success than not in creating pretty cohesive groups. To give you an example, there's a class from maybe 2 or 3 years ago that every single year has reunions in different parts of the country, and they all go to them. That's not inexpensive, and that's not a small time commitment. This year's class, I very quickly discovered it is impossible to only communicate with one of them because they're constantly on a group text. So I found that if I ever need to say anything to any one of them, I can just tell one, and then everyone else will know 30 seconds later. Not every class is like that, but more often than not, some pretty tight bonds get formed. And we try and foster that. Both because we think that that's going to serve you well moving forward, and also it's an intense program, and you're more likely to have fun if you're close with the people you're spending a lot of intense time with. Last year, 2 years ago, some recent year, probably within a month or 6 weeks, it seemed like the students were sort of doing their work and then going their separate ways, and so we helped facilitate a dinner so they could all get together on their own. So it's something we're aware of, and it's something that we try and do whatever we can to ensure it happens. So, yeah.
How much graduate student housing is available at MIT, and how?
If you want graduate student housing, you'll get it.
And any logistic question?
You should go to
Really, any
Shannon.
question at all, Shannon Larkin, who's standing right there, whose email is slarkin, SLARKIN, @mit.edu. She is the repository of all wisdom.
Not just any logistical question, as I have found since I've been here, any question about anything in the universe you should ask Shannon, and she will probably have the answer. But yes, Shannon is certainly, and all of our students will say this, as much of, if not more of an asset than any one of the faculty. Her office is a couple of doors down from the graduate student lounge. In addition to being a constant source of chocolate, it is also a source of comfort and reassurance and logistical help, and it's impossible to overstate the impact Shannon has had on the program and on our students' lives. So start talking to her now, and it will not stop for years to come.
But specifically, any question you have about the application process, Shannon is the person. She'll get back to you faster than most of us will, but she'll also most likely be the one.
If you ask us, we will probably say we have to ask Shannon, so you might as well have the middle person.
And if she needs us, she ropes us in very efficiently.
Yes. Do you have a question?
I was curious if the science writing program intersects with the CMS program in any way.
That's a great question. So CMS is Comparative Media Studies. The department that the graduate program in science writing exists in is Comparative Media Studies and Writing. That is the academic department we exist in. That department has 2 graduate programs, the graduate program in science writing and a master's in Comparative Media Studies, which is a multi-year program. They do interact somewhat. We have one very strong relationship going from a graduate from our program in the CMS program. We also now have our first impending nuptials among 2 GPSW students. Yes, I'll tell you about it later.
Nobody tells me anything.
We do one of my thesis advisees warms my heart incredibly. There are some things throughout the year, especially at the beginning, where we all get together. The CMS graduate program is not housed. Their student lounge is not in this building. It's a multi-year program. We're a 1-year program. And both programs are very intense. So there is not an enormous amount of opportunity for everyone to get together. But that's something that we make sure there are a couple of opportunities throughout the year. We also have, I think we usually have 1 or 2 either dinners or afternoon ice cream fests a semester for the graduate students from both programs. Sort of whenever Shannon feels her antenna feel a need for some stress reduction, she will get an ice cream sundae bar going and get everyone there, or get a dinner going or something like that. So.
And there is some educational overlap. I mean,
They
end up in electives together, and they are aware of that.
Yeah. There's a
sort of great middle that we actually can't see.
Yeah.
So if you've got questions there in the middle.
We probably have, I don't want to make you guys sit for too long. I need to go and not too long, so we probably have time for a couple more questions. If we don't get to your questions today, or if you think of a question after we're gone, Shannon is S. Larkin, Smanukin at MIT.edu, or actually Smanukin at virtually any email you can think of. But S, M as in Mary, N as in Nancy, OOKIN at MIT.edu. Are you just Levinson?
I'm just Levinson.
He's just Levinson at MIT, not just Levinson, Levinson at MIT.edu. You can contact any of us with questions also. Yeah.
I know the SES program is pretty new here, at least the PhD in it.
The STS?
There's like the TPP program, the technology, policy,
Right.
that does like the master's side of things, and then there's like a newer PhD that's a couple years old.
Is it STS?
Society and
No, I know what you're talking about.
Okay.
Society and Engineering Systems or something, but it's, I forget the exact acronym.
I obviously don't even know the exact name. So.
Okay, because my next question was going to be, do you guys do any collaboration with those guys?
Nope.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm a first year PhD student here, and I was wondering, so it's 5 years, I was wondering if I have to wait until I'm done to get involved in the program, or if there's any way that I can, I don't know, take any classes beforehand?
So there are two answers to that question. Probably, yes, you need to wait, and yes, there are ways to take programs. The documentary course that Tom teaches is open. It's an institute-wide course. It's open to graduate students and undergrads, and it
has a listing as both a graduate. It's not just open. It's meets with its graduate number and an undergraduate number.
It typically, the GPSW usually makes up a little more than half of its students. The advanced science writing seminars, you can apply to take that with permission of an instructor. That has been granted once since I've been here, and that was as a favor essentially to another department who's trying to woo a faculty member. We've just found that it's such an intensive program that it's difficult to do and also be engaged in another program. We have had MIT PhD graduates come to the GPSW. What department are you in?
Geology?
Geology. I mean, I'm happy to put you in touch with some students who got a PhD here and then did the GPSW and to talk to them about that experience. It's also, so I think it would be tough to do / impossible to do probably while you're engaged in the coursework of your PhD.
Yeah, we had before Seth got here, we had a third-year student in biology who was a wonderful writer, and unlike the student that Seth mentioned, was a wonderful addition to the class. And she completed the first term, but her work badly deteriorated over the course of the semester, not because she became less capable, but just because the pace and demands of trying to do essentially two full-time, intensive full-time programs was too much even for her brilliant and high-energy self.
When we steer you away from things, it's always because of experience. I mean, we always have students, and Shannon can speak to this even better than I can, who took an undergraduate physics course, and so wherever they went to school and were great, and so think that they can now take a graduate physics course here, and we will always say, you can't. Trust us, and then it takes until about 3 weeks into the semester for them to realize that we were not lying. We've had the hardest working and most talented students here. When we say we don't recommend you doing that, or it's because of experience. Yeah. Any other? I really want to get a question from this, but I guess I'm not going to succeed there.
There's such attentive faces back there.
I know.
You must have some mystery that you want to resolve.
Did I miss anyone in the back? Did you have your hand raised?
Oh,
yeah.
I'm sorry. Nice to meet you. Thanks for doing
Yeah.
Just looking at the publications, I guess, online scope you have on YouTube. Are there any other like printed things that people publish in the program or seminars they give throughout their studies?
Sure, yeah. So, so Scope is the only student-run publication that we have. Did you get here a little bit later? Were you here? Okay, so our students also, especially during the news segment, oftentimes will publish on the Nova, PBS Nova site, because the person who teaches our news segment runs Nova Next, their website. In terms of presentations, part of the requirement for the thesis is giving a public presentation on their work, and we do have a public speaking component of the curriculum for that. But Scope is the only student-run publication. I don't know if you were here when Tom was talking about it. There are oftentimes assignments for different parts of the course will get published either in Technology Review, and you get paid for those. So there are different opportunities, but Scope is the one student publication. Yeah?
Yeah, a related question. Do students get involved in any outreach, public outreach activities as well?
Like what?
From like writing, any other...
Like what? I'm sorry, say that? Like
any other kind of public outreach activities? Not necessarily writing.
Not,
extracurricular.
I mean, there's not a huge, just in terms of time constraints. I mean, we have students who get involved with different activities or different clubs within MIT, but it's a pretty intensive program. So it's more likely that students will make connections or start relationships that then result in their being involved in outreach programs after they leave, in specific outreach programs after they leave. But again, that it also depends. I mean, a couple of years ago, the National Association of Science Writers Conference was in Boston, was actually at MIT, and so our students volunteered as part of that and were very involved in that effort, in that larger effort. So it depends a little bit year to year, but for the most part, that probably happens after they leave. One last question? We're actually probably over time already, but well, thank you. This has been incredible. You guys have all been great. It is great to see you all here. I hope I see you all. I hope I see all of your applications. I hope I see all of you at MIT. But regardless of whether I do or not, I hope you all stay involved and committed and engaged with science and science communication and science writing. It is wonderful to see so many people be interested in this, and good luck with everything you guys do.
Thank you.